Okay, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, it looks like it's going to be focused around the topics of sex and gender. We've got two things that kind of led us to the path today. The first one is actually if I was to be in my apolitical realm that I was in like 10 years ago, I would still have to get into because it's dealing with Title IX. And as we know, there's a lot of stuff going and they amended everything. And I will confess, I did not read all 1,500 pages. But I read enough to know that about 1,300 of the 1,500 are we received comments on this, we received comments on this, we received comments on this, and there's important paragraphs intermixed in there that say, and however, this is what we concluded. So I'm going to focus on this is what we're actually going to do, not their comments on comments, especially since they're all anecdotes. And they seem to prefer some anecdotes over others. Uh,
Yes.
and then Heath wanted to bring this into. I'm actually not 100% sure where he's going, but it is based on what I brought up with Tulsi Gabbard. Was that in a Wheel of Time episode?
Yeah, I think it was our last Wheel of Time episode when we were
Okay, so
talking
let
about
me
what
kind
we
of
were gonna.
paraphrase it.
Yeah.
Let me kind of review it. So I brought it up in one of the Wheel of Time. So if you're just in the social stuff, you wouldn't have heard it. She was on Patrick Bet David's show, and they did a live audience show, and they asked her about Kamala, and she made a comment that if a guy had said it, he would have been called a patriarchal, misogynist, whatever, all of these things. But she said the most dangerous thing is if Kamala takes over because it is a semi-female trait when they reach places of power. Not a trait as in it's necessarily a female genetic thing, but it is something that a lot of females think they have to do because they are recently reaching places of power. I mean, we're talking the last 50 years, right? And which is not a long time when it comes to civilizations. Uh, they are recently reaching these, and when they get there, they feel like they have to prove themselves, and they do it in a manly, what is a stereotypically manly way, which is hammer down. Look at her record as a prosecutor. She was one of the most strict prosecutors of California history. Actually, they probably could use that right now because, you know, this whole you could pretty much steal $900 worth of stuff and not get prosecuted is part of the problem. I wonder if they'll ever figure that out. But she basically was the complete opposite. She, in Tulsi's destroying of her on the debate stage during the Democrat national the primaries during 2020 or 2019, I guess, uh, she brought up her record that she was sending a lot of people to hardcore jail for minor drug crimes
hmm
and using them as slave labor during the
hmm
time. And then when asked about her own use of pot and weed, her answer was, "Oh yeah," her cackle. That's exactly what it was. I listened to it myself to make sure it wasn't just something I'd heard about. And I'm like, it was like, who hasn't? And laugh, 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 cackle, cackle, cackle.
Yeah.
So she is afraid, her fear with the unrest around the world is she will come in and do something rash when it comes to either Ukraine, Russia, or more likely Israel, Palestine to show how tough she is. And she's like, there are women with more self control. The
hmm
pressure is there. I feel the pressure, but I can resist the pressure. I don't think she can. So that's the topic that kind of spurred your thoughts, and I don't know where you're going to go from there. But we'll start with Title IX because it's a simpler one, and that's the one I feel obligated to speak about because I train young women, and I have taken young women from 14 years old post ACL tear to college soccer to softball to college basketball. I haven't had any pro females in any sport, but that's actually kind of rare just because pro female sports is rare. But
Gee,
anything to add before I
wonder
go
what
into the
what
nuts and bolts?
No, I didn't want to sidetrack us too much. So there were some interesting flips of Riley Gaines recently. I think it was the Alaska House that she was testifying before because they were considering one of these bills that would explicitly say, hey, no, if you were born with woman parts, then you play women's sports. If you were born with man parts, then you play men's sports. And some soy boy Democrat was, do you have any empirical evidence that because he didn't say men, he said, trans women, I think was the term he used, have a uh inherent advantage over uh what you call, he said something dumb like what you call uh 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 natural born girls, or what I would refer to as cisgender women. And
Yeah,
there's this
we're getting
pause.
to language because
Yeah,
that's part of my
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And that's where the language comes in, and that's why this uh Title IX legalistic effery is important. But I thought it was funny that there was this pause and she just had this look on her face like, you have got to be freaking kidding me. And she made the point that needs to be made repeatedly when we're talking about this of, hey, isn't it interesting that we haven't seen it go the other way? Joanna Man has not happened in the NBA, only in the WNBA.
There have been select cases of them trying. It just hasn't made the news because they're not doing well. Now, I actually applaud those for trying because that shows me some commitment, not just I want to cheat to
Yeah,
win.
yeah.
That shows commitment to the dysphoria. And that's the person we should be taking care of because they are so in that world that
Mm-hmm,
they're willing to risk their health to prove that that's where their mind is.
mm-hmm.
And that's laudable, but also concerning. And we
Yeah,
you can have both thoughts at once. That's where compassion comes in because this person is in this state. What we have, the problem we have with the other way around, biological males joining, biological female sports because they identify a certain way, you cannot differentiate between the people who are in the state I just talked about versus those that are in the state of I'm a narcissist and I need to win and I need the medals.
yeah,
The same example, the same thing would go for people trying to get into women's prisons as a biological male. I am guilty of this crime, and I am probably going to have my booty hole opened more than Sam is next week in his surgery. So I want to be in a place where they don't have the parts to do that. In fact, I can actually do things to them
mm-hmm,
because just because I identify as this, I could be a trans woman lesbian, right? So that's and the nature of the thing is so many women in women's prisons have a libido and they're going to welcome the thing that they lack. So it's uh, gaming the system versus someone who has a real problem. Now, someone who games the system has a real problem, but it's a criminal problem, not a something we should have compassion for problem. And we cannot parse it out. We cannot, with the way the game is now, we cannot figure out who's who. And but yeah, no, language is important. So let's go ahead and get into the documents. So I wanted to do it. I wanted to get it from the horse's mouth itself. So this is U.S. Department of Education. They released their new Title IX regulations. This is the long document right here. As you can see, it is 1,577 pages. So one thing we've noticed in legislation from the last years of legislation is these giant documents that are impossible to read all the way through before they go to their governing
Well,
bodies
minor
are part of the
quibble here
problem.
though, but it's not a minor quibble because this is the problem. Um, and we have harped on this before. This isn't legislation. This is based on legislation. Title
Mhm.
IX originally came from a piece of legislation,
The
but
the
now,
this is the technical definition of a deep state entity
mhm,
because they are not elected officials, but they get their power from the executive branch.
Exactly. And you see right there the first line of the summary, the US Department of Education amends the regulation implementing Title IX of the. Well, hold on a second. You're amending a law. You can't do that. You are not a legislative body. You are a regulatory body. But the legalistic loophole is, we're amending the regulations. Okay, except these regulations have the force of law, and you are changing that. Therefore, you are changing law. But nobody cares because our elected legislatures care more about lining their pockets and getting reelected, and they don't actually pass laws, and they don't want to pass laws because then they're accountable for something.
The good news is, and I did check this comparing the two documents, there is a summary document that says the quiet parts out loud. So you actually get some of you get a lot of the things that are very problematic about this from the summary article. And let's see what page. Wait, did I do these out of order? Okay, let's see. 1064. Okay, so that's right. All right. So the first one I'd like to bring forward is, if my highlighting is coming through, right here. Conflict of interest and bias-free Title IX coordinators, investigators, and decision makers. These are the people that are getting extended power now. So this is number one problematic thing, which makes everything else bad, because some of the other things I'm going to go through are wordplay, and the people in charge of administering what would you call it? The judgments. The people in charge of administering the judgments are going to interpret the words the way that they do. So if it was a trial by jury, it's whatever population of jury you get in, they interpret it a different way, and then they argue about it in the deliberation room, right? Who are these conflict of interest and bias-free Title IX coordinators, investigators, and decision makers? We don't know. They are
Well,
probably bureaucrats who made this document.
I'll tell you the first thing to spring to mind when they say conflict of interest and bias free. Just get in the way back machine and go back just whatever it was 3 years ago. Ketanji Brown Jackson, when she was having her confirmation hearing, how do you define a woman? Well, I'm not a biologist. No, but you are a judge seeking to be on the highest court in the land, and definitions matter. So, as a judge, as a legal supposed scholar, what is the legal definition of a woman? I can't define that. Go back a couple more years and remember this should have gotten way more airplay, but it didn't because it doesn't fit the narrative. Amy Coney Barrett was getting grilled by the Democrats because she is a conservative Catholic. And they were trying to make the case in a not so subtle way
That the
that
Catholicism would make her biased.
that made her biased, and therefore she wouldn't be able to render proper judgments because she would be basing her ideas not on the law but on her conservative Catholicism.
Let me take it a step forward, a step further. Bias free, the only way to be released of bias in the ideological spectrum of the people who wrote this document is to see the world through a critical lens. That's why I put up James Lindsay's book up there, Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay, because you release yourself from bias when you can see the world through a critical lens, because then you can actually release yourself of your own bias. And so that is the criteria that is a prerequisite for their definition of bias free. And if you do that, then you must be a gender studies, something studies, women's studies, something, insert studies, not sciences, studies to the qualification. So these people are going to come from a specific group of people. That's That's danger number one, because when we get to the language, you're going to see exactly where that goes.
Or since this is in relation to um uh sex discrimination in education institutions, pretty much all college of education departments now are those studies that you were just talking
Well,
about. So
that's
this
where
is
the long
someone with a
march began.
master's or a
Or
PhD in
not, that's not
education.
where it began. It's where the second step. It began in the legal,
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
which is why they have the language. This is a legal document, right? It
Yeah.
began in the legal departments, and then it went to education, because they realized if we educate the educators, then we can make the heads of every department
Hmm.
someone of this. The head of the department, the physics department, isn't the best physics professor. It is a person who is an education of physics major, not a physics major. That's key, because we talked about this in the last one. Bitter admin,
Hmm.
because they weren't good enough to be a physicist. So they became an physics administration person, a medical administration person who wrote the AMA document, which on the first page says we need to control the narrative. What?
Hmm.
Yeah. So let's go back up to the first page. So that's the first problematic, people. Now we've identified who's going to be making the judgments according to this document. What are they judging? 1062, 106.8. There we go. Okay, so here, this is important. Clarifies that sex discrimination, which is the purpose of Title IX, right?
Hmm.
We cannot deny scholarships based on your sex. We cannot deny, educational program access based on your sex. Sex being important because it's male, female, sex versus gender, right? This is where they play with the words. Now they're expanding sex discrimination to include discrimination based on sex stereotypes, as it was, sex characteristics, pregnancy, which is good, or related conditions. We're adding the related conditions now, sexual orientation and gender identity. So now they are combining sex and gender in a quote unquote codified law that never went through legislation.
Hmm.
So now we're combining two terms that are not the same. Sex and gender are becoming one based on this document, which is problematic, because now everything that is sex discrimination can be expanded to gender, which apparently is fluid. So, next problematic statement. This is the biggie right here. Because remember who's determining this. Recognizes that preventing a person from participating in a recipient's education program or activity, sports, UIL, everything, consistent with their gender identity, subjects that person to more than de minimis harm. This is the biggest one for me. So we already know who's making the judgments. So now who determines de minimis harm? The person in charge of the judgment, who is trained in the critical theories, who has been using the concept creep of harm to expand their ideology for the last 50 years.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of uh sneaky effort things there. Again, as with the previous one, we have suddenly shifted from sex to gender identity, and I think that's a big red flag that you just touched on there is harm. The idea of harm is
Well, and their
I
determination on it, that
yeah.
disallowing the trans man to participate in female sports is is beyond de minimis harm, because of the emotional harm you're doing to that trans man or trans female, excuse me, trans female, male to
and
female. Yeah.
and the potential punishments to someone because remember this has been going on for a while and I've been old man screaming at the clouds of, wait, this is not violence. Words are not violence. Sticks and stones. And that's dangerous to say that if I don't call Leah Thomas a her, I have just committed violence. I have
We're
just
gonna
done
get to that.
harm.
It's in here.
Oh, great, great. So no, that is dangerous because what you're saying is that is the same as assault. That me not saying her is the same as if I had punched the dude who's walking around with a raging erection staring at the girls in the locker room. If I punch that creep in the face, that's the exact same thing as not saying her.
Yeah. Okay. So
That's
this
not
this,
good.
this is a minor thing that's in the summary here. This is important because of what you just said. Hostile environment harassment. They're including this now other than just straight up actual harassment. All right. So what creates a hostile environment? We got to get into the big document for the definitions there. Let me see if I had any other notes in the summary. No, this is all. Oh, here's the highlight. What is this? Ah, yeah. Okay. So page 9. Okay, so this is just adding to one of the things we already said. So we talked about the decision maker, what qualifies as a decision maker. So this is encoding in to permit the decision maker to weigh the credibility of a party or witness when a party or witness refuses to respond to relevant or permissible questions. So you go to court, such and such comes in and says, no, he didn't do that. He says, no, I didn't do that. And he, her, they, them comes in and says he did that. The person in charge can say, yeah, we don't have to listen to those people. But your
So,
truth matters because you're oppressed.
okay, again, another clarification though. You used the word court, and that's not what this will be. This will be a regulatory hearing. This will be some sort of regulatory
I used
body.
court in the small c sense.
Yes, in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
casual sense, but it's important to remember that when these disciplinary actions happen, it's not a court. Although it can have the
I was about to say the
impact,
same end result, same
yes,
impact.
the
Yeah.
ramification, the same uh 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 positive or negative impact on someone's life as a court of law, they are not courts of law, and thus you don't have the same protections. You don't have a presumption of innocence. You don't have necessarily a right to counsel. And the big one there was basically what they just said is so a big thing that was that both the judge and the prosecutor and then even the defense attorney, again, a point they all three of them made in the jury pool was, this is what the Fifth Amendment is, this is what it means, this is why it exists, and you have to not hold it against someone if they don't testify. Are you able to do that? That document just said you are totally permitted to, if someone doesn't want to testify, if someone doesn't want to go up in front of your Maoist court, you can hold that against them. That is antithetical to Western liberal democracy rule of law going back 500 years.
Okay, so now we're in the main document. You can see 1,577 pages there. We're on page 33 of the PDF, which I think is like 31. Oh, 17. There's a lot of like bibliography and table of contents and stuff. But if you're looking through this, if you're on the PDF, it's 33. If you have the actual book or whatever, it's 17. Transgender students shared, like I say, remember I talked about most of it was like anecdotes from comments that they decide to include. This is an example of that, and I'm going to show you both sides. So they share both sides' comments. They always start with the oppressed group, seems like, but that's just a small little observation I made. Transgender students shared being forced to use school facilities that do not align with their gender identity, feeling unsafe using these facilities. I guess it's unsafe to stand and pee in a urinal when you have a penis, but you don't want to have a penis. They do have stalls. Sit and spin, man. Uh, but then we go down just a little bit further, and where do they say it's cisgender? Where's the cisgender here? Yeah, here we go. Cisgender girls and women have equal access to education, and two grandmothers share their memories of being forced to fundraise for basic sports equipment and being told not to pursue. And they also showed concerns of sharing facilities. So they did show both sides in the document, but when we get to the howevers, we saw both sides. However, we're gonna make this decision. 165, page 165. Here we go. This was the one that was problematic. Here we go. Other commenters urged the department to clarify that misgendering is a form of sexual-based harassment that can create a hostile environment, especially for gender non-conforming and LGBTQI plus students. They neglected the two spirits. I'm so sad that they knocked them out of there, but you know.
Don't forget the silent P.
But yeah, so misgendering is a form of sex-based harassment that can create a hostile environment. What was one of the bullet points I brought up? That creates a situation where this is a Title IX offense, a hostile environment. Huge. So misgendering creates a hostile environment, and it is now an offense that can there was one more thought I had on that.
Well, that's a good point, is that the bullet point was problematic if you looked at it and thought about it, but it was written in sneaky effort language of, hey, who wants a hostile environment? Who wants harm? Well, are you pro harm? No, we're just saying that it could be this, and then buried in the actual text of the document, it's, oh no, not could. It's, now we straight up said it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they go into this further, and we have to actually jump like 1,000 pages here. 1251. Okay, so this is important. Department appreciates a commenter's recognition that one person may not know the other's gender identity without inquiring unless the other person volunteers information. So this is a comment on accidentally misgendering somebody. So someone comes forward and they look like a male, they act like a male, they dress like a male, they do all these things, and you say, "Thank you, ma'am," and she goes, "I'm a he, him, and you just harmed me." So it's or excuse me, yeah. So did I get that wrong? Did I say acts like a male and everything? And
No, you got it right.
I got it
You
right.
say
Okay.
you say ma'am, but it's no, I'm a he.
Yeah. So this is the accidental misgendering. They're establishing this as an offense right now because they say, "Oh, we appreciate that you said that it can happen on accident, but this, however, there's a lot of howevers in this document, does not undermine the fact that the gender identity discrimination is sex discrimination." Combining the two again. Gender identity discrimination is sex discrimination. By comparison, one person may not know another's sexual orientation, religion, race, or national origin without asking, but may still discriminate against them, for example, harassing them on one of those bases in a matter that creates a hostile educational environment, or by discriminating against them based on perceived traits. So, what would be kind of like the equivalent here? Uh, I don't know that you're a Baptist, and I make a joke about Baptists in front of you, right? and then you say, "Oh, I didn't like that because I'm Baptist," and then I have the opportunity to say I'm sorry, but it's too late, right? That's the way I read that. How did you understand that?
Yeah, the first, so this is basically already in law going back decades, and it was fictionalized but based on real stories in the oh, I'm brain farting. The movie where Tom Hanks has AIDS and Denzel Washington is his lawyer. Um, Philadelphia. Uh, so one of the courtroom scenes is when Hanks is testifying. He's talking about how he felt there were a number of times where it's just the dudes hanging out and there were, anti-gay homophobic jokes that were made and nobody knew that he was a closeted gay. So this made him feel like he had to stay closeted, and that's why he felt when it when he was outed that, and then he was fired, thus, ipso facto. So this is already something that can happen, but there has to be actual harm that goes along with it to show that yes, you were discriminating. And it's not just, oh, somebody made a
But
gay joke and there's a closeted gay.
that leads us right to the next one, because now we're going by the term. Where's it at? Look for de minimis harm here. 1284 on the PDF. 1284. Okay, so this is the beginning of the paragraph. The department has determined, based on careful reading of Title IX and each of its statutory provisions, that sex separation in certain circumstances, including in the context of bathrooms or locker rooms, is not presumptively unlawful. So they're saying that saying you have a boys' bathroom and a girls' bathroom, or a boys' locker room and a girls' locker room, that is not unlawful. Okay, so we are segregating these things,
Yeah.
right? Then here's the however. However, when such separation imposes more than de minimis injury to a protected individual, such as when it denies a transgender student access to a sex-separated facility or activity consistent with their gender identity, this would violate Title IX's general non-discrimination mandate. So they acknowledge that boys and girls should have separate facilities,
Mhm.
but they further that with their however, that a transgender student is what they identify as for the purposes of using those facilities. We didn't vote on this.
Oop.
Those were my big points. So I know we wanted to not dwell too long. Do you have this is dangerous. This is problematic. We do have some states coming out against it. Paxton, with Texas, is
Mhm.
filing a lawsuit. Uh, but I think there's a bigger issue here. Let's get back to our ugly mugs. There's a bigger issue here, and it is the fact that these entities can even do this. This is
That's
Yeah,
that's the real point. Yeah.
and it becomes codified in law. That's the problem, because if this goes through, which is August 1st, 2024, if this goes through completely and nobody does anything, and 3 years later there's an incident, this is the precedent that will be used for the legal argument,
Mhm.
even though it never was truly made a law, because that's what Congresses do, whether it's on the state level, the local level, or the federal level.
All right. So there's several things jump to mind there with what you just said, but the first thing I want to talk about, because this is in your wheelhouse, is what is it about female psychology that makes them want to? Because you've talked before about how they're coalitional. And so that tends to lead them towards let's all get along. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And so people like Riley Gaines, like Moms for Liberty, those people are out there, but they're outliers. And if you look at the polling I've seen, at least, that at best, most women on this issue are kind of wobbly, if not outright in the, oh, yes, trans people should have their spaces too. Well, hold on a second. So you're saying because of one person's feeling, now an entire locker room full of women are made to feel uncomfortable, or in their words, outright unsafe, or not even in their words. That's what the whole thing in Virginia was all about, that dad got arrested for when he confronted the school board about it. So what is it about female psychology? And the reason this matters and what this is going to lead into is because the women's vote is going to be a big effing deal this election.
Well, according to the last 30 years of elections, it is the swing vote anyways.
Yeah.
But okay, so I got a positive and a negative on this. And I'll start with the positive. The first thing is I want to say, and this is important for the second part, don't confuse female athlete with average female.
That's a good point.
Okay, so here's some evidence. And man, I had to really go for this while you were on your little bathroom break. But okay, so we're looking at Forbes. Forbes is completely woke right now, but they still wrote this article. It talking about percentage of women that are CEOs that played sports, right? So even though 2 out of 5, it is in a previous paragraph, 2 out of 5 women or girls play sports. Here we go. The average, when in a 2013 survey studied 821 top female executives, 90% of them had played sports growing up. And in fact, that's grown to 96%. And somewhere around 50% of those were college female athletes. So let's go to Twitter, and we'll go to Riley Gaines because I knew she had posted this. These are female shot putters, and there is a trans female competing in this competition. Let's watch the video. Female number 1. Oh, nope, protest. Female number 2. Nope, protest. Female number 3. Nope, protest. Every female in this competition refused to actually throw against the trans female. And that's step 1.
Mm-hmm.
Step 2 is every female athlete in the country needs to do this at the same time. And step 3 is all us reasonable men need to support them. Because, yeah, we're also 50% of the population. Maybe more now that we have millions of illegal young men coming across the border, but that's a separate issue. But we are 50% of the population, and women and men are most successful when they work together. That's why the whole puncher in the face in New York is so detrimental to everything, because so many people are saying, well, they're getting what they're deserved. And as a man, you know, Daniel Penny, he accidentally killed that guy while defending women on the subway. And he went to jail. Everybody's using that as don't stand up for women because they get it. They're getting what they deserve. The red pill and the black pill societies are saying that. You know whom they've never asked? Daniel Penny. Would you have done it again? Yeah, would you do it again?
Because I guarantee you, he'd say,
he's proud of what he did. He didn't want the guy to die, but the guy wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is so the female athletes needs to step up, and all at once. So number 2, and us men need to support them. And that overpowers Group number 2, which is my negative. The negative is, what did it say? 2 in 5 females compete in sports in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
That's to include the ones that were forced to do it when they were little,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that number is even bigger. So you've got a giant, at least 60% of the population of females, minimum, which I would say probably the other half are the ones that were of the two were forced to do it, which means they're bitter about sports
Mm-hmm.
if they were forced to do it. So somewhere around 60 to 80% of the population of females don't have that mentality.
It is one of my regrets with my daughter is that um I didn't push her, not force, but nudge, push into staying in something, not necessarily sports, but in something competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Because that mattered. The competition is what matters.
The problem is this same cohort of people. Let me word this. Are in charge of, not responsible for, in charge of so many decisions that happen to all of us at a young age, because
Yes.
those are the PTO moms. Those are the people that can't get off Facebook because they have nothing better to do all day. These these are the Peggy Bundys of the world, right? This is the truth. Go on your local whatever town moms and dads or moms group and
Mm-hmm.
just look at the discourse for a little bit. Look at the things they talk about, what they complain about. This is the same group of people who are responsible for the trophy for everyone. Not because that's what's right, not because they're even the majority, but they're the people who have the time. I've talked about a lot of with clients and stuff around here. Look at the way your elementary, your intermediate, your junior high, and your high school are set up. It is around stay-at-home moms in the suburbs.
Hmm.
They get the most benefit from the setup of when they go to school, when they get off school, when this happens, when that happens, how it happens. I'm like, yeah, because they're the ones that have time to be on the PTO because they're not at work all day. They're not doing actual things with their life, so they have to have a purpose, and their purpose is doing this, and they're completely disconnected. There's a distance between these people and the repercussions of the things they do. So you talked about that class. So I talked about the good class. The other 60 to 80% are distanced from it. Rob Henderson talks about luxury beliefs. What is a luxury belief? Luxury belief is something that sounds good but has no consequence on you. Add to that, everybody gets a trophy, conformity. Now we add social media to the issue. It looks like by the media, by the way they do it, social media, that accepting the LGBTQIA plus community is the norm, that these people are everywhere, all over the place, killing themselves, just like we saw after George Floyd, with thousands of Black people are shot by cops every year. Well, no, that was 18. Uh, so you add this, I'm being a good person and I'm part of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And if again, we go to social media, makes this worse, but it's bad in every situation. I leave the group or say something different and they pile on. And now I'm the outcast. I don't want to look bad. I've got to play the reputation game. I'm just, Mama Sue doing my job. I'm a housewife. I do this. Da, da, da. So this is the cohort. The I'm not a competitive athlete. I don't have that mindset. I am a conformist. I am a this, I'm a that, and everything should be fair. They're looking at it like, oh, Leah Thomas won the gold medal. I mean, what do medals matter anyways? You had fun, didn't you? And that competitive athlete's going, no,
Do you know how
I
hard I
have a
worked?
scholarship. You know how hard I worked? Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. You say, you know how hard I worked to your standard suburban soccer mom. I am getting us canceled here. Your standard suburban soccer mom, and they're going to bring up, well, I have 2 kids. You know how hard that is? It's like, okay, yeah, okay. How about 2 kids and working? Did you do that? Well, I did this multi-level marketing thing.
So I don't remember who I first heard say this of it's not an accident that we can no longer define a woman at the peak time when we have completely forgotten what masculinity is.
Okay,
And that has
so
been going on for decades, but now we've kind of reached a peak point to where you've got this critical mass of what that is and why this is. And this actually kind of
let,
came up last. Go
let
ahead.
me
Go ahead.
comment. Let me comment on the defining a woman part with the crowd I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the conformity comes in, and the sense of, well, it's the okay. So this is the cognitive dissonance that they can't get past. So they do mean well, but they're convincing in themselves they're doing well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole, and you see this when you I saw this in my local school when uh another school just close by, the other side of the town I live in has a different school, and because one side is one county and one side is the other, and they had this group come in to teach LGBTQ acceptance and da 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 da. And someone brought up on the message boards, well, we need to keep this out of our school because look what's happening over there. And someone was like, well, it's just being nice. Pronouns, it's just being nice. That's the mentality. It's I'm conforming and I'm just being nice. What's going to happen? You're just making them feel better. That's exactly where that other 60 to 80% is. The problem is they're the swing vote, which is where you're going.
Yep.
They're the
Yep.
swing vote. Every other group in the United States of America has voted very consistently across the last 30 some odd years of since civil rights, really, of elections. So that's almost 60 years now, almost. Uh, very consistently. The vote that actually decides our president every cycle is the white female middle class vote.
Yeah. And where are the men? Is so
They're voting consistently. As far as voting goes, I don't know how you can change that, but
well,
unless you're going to try to revoke 19, but
how do I say this nicely rather than saying it the way I want to say it? If you are an assertive masculine man, you don't have to say, woman, here's how you should vote. You're going to demonstrate it with your action. You're going to be an example. So last night, I don't even remember the context, but my daughter was laughing about how in one of her classes, I don't even remember, maybe it was history. The teacher, just for giggles, had them read this like 1960, how to be a woman thing. And you see these memes online a lot of, haha, look at this thing from 1948 from, you know, Good Housekeeping about how to be a proper woman. And it's oh my gosh, weren't they so sexist back then? And it just dawned on me, well, wait a minute. No, because in 1948, you did that because you were trying to get a man who was worth having. Because you were doing that to get and keep a man who was literally going to break his back to take care of you and your children.
yeah, but that's unnecessary anymore because
Exactly.
laptop
So,
class.
exactly. So, where are the men is, well, we've replaced men with government, we've replaced men with technology, we've we've and then we have spent half a century gearing our education system, an education system made by women for girls. That's where the men are. That's why they're gone. And to your point,
Well, and blame the industry that I'm kind of in now is we've medicated the man out of men.
yeah,
The
yeah,
boy that can't sit down and shut up, he probably has some manly characteristics
he wants
because
to do.
yeah,
That's why he can't
yeah,
sit down and
yeah.
shut up, because we want to do.
Hmm.
Um, that's why I was so pleased that not only did the high school here have a shop class, but they had a good one. They had a good teacher and they had a good facility. Um, so and my son was actually seriously considering, because they did welding. It's why I have welding gloves, because I had to get him welding gloves for shop class, and he was like, "Wait, this is fun, and welders get paid how much?"
Yeah, welders
And
get paid a lot.
and so he was seriously considering that until he needed an extra math class, and he was like, "Well, I've already done calculus. What's left? Oh, accounting counts as a math class. I'll take that. That looks easy." And then he said, "Wait, accountants get paid how much, and they don't have to weld?" It's like, I'll go that route because this is easy and I get to be in air conditioning.
More power to him because accounting is my least. We those of us that like math say accounting isn't math
Yeah,
because it is. Yeah. Oh, I more power to him. God bless the people who do that job, so I don't have to.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anywho, how did I get on this track? Oh, yes, the female vote. It's really going to matter this election cycle. And that's, I think, part of why RFK already announced that he has his VP is a woman. Obviously Biden not only said, even before he picked, was not only am I going to pick a woman, it's going to be a woman of color.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of talk that, and you have the odds up that
I'm getting it
Trump
right now. There we go.
is going to pick a woman, possibly Tulsi. I think that would be awesome. Kristi Noem, the governor of North or
Christy
South
Noem.
Dakota, I can't
This is
remember.
that's the funny thing when I brought these up earlier. Okay, so Tim Scott's still on the top. Tulsi Gabbard is still number two. Elise Stefanik was number four
I know that name, but I
until
can't remember who she is.
she is the senator, I think, from South Carolina. It's what whichever Carolina is Dick Cheney with heels. What God dang it. That was running in the primary. And why am I blanking on the name?
Liz Cheney?
No, running in the primary.
Oh, she didn't run, did she?
No.
No, who was
Oh, she
the
might be on the list.
the Haley. Nikki
Haley.
Haley.
Yeah, gosh, why
She,
couldn't I bring that name?
yeah, governor of South Carolina.
Yeah, so she it's the same state, but she's also the one that grilled a lot of I'm trying to remember which trials she was in, the Senate trials, but she was I think it was a COVID stuff, but
Mm,
she made a name for herself there. JD Vance, Ben Carson, but okay, so realistically the top two here. Tulsi Gabbard, Tim Scott.
mm-hmm,
So what are you going for? If this one is obvious because which vote are you going for?
mm-hmm,
Are you going for well, Tim Scott covers two grounds. He covers I'm a man of color,
mm-hmm.
and I am more to the conservative Republican base. So he is more the establishment because he would be the person of color Mike Pence pick.
What this is that Tim Scott is the boomer Republican vote, because boomer Republicans have been fed up for 40, 50 years of being called racist just because you're a Republican. That's what that is look, I'm not a racist. I just voted for a black vice presidential candidate.
Now Tulsi covers two things as well. She's female. She is also a former Democrat, now independent.
Mm-hmm,
So if you're trying to bring the independent vote over, she's the pick to pick.
mm-hmm,
Now, Tim Scott better be ready for you're the House, you know
mm-hmm.
what. And Tulsi better be ready for the female hate that will come her way. Kristi Noem dropped off. You didn't see the controversy with her?
No.
She released her book. And in the book, she talks about killing animals, including a dog that couldn't just be trained properly.
Oh my gosh, I hadn't heard this.
No, it wasn't like a dog with a disease or anything like that. It was, and her response was, "Well, I'm going to give it to you straight. Have you ever lived on a farm?" And blah 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 blah. But the specific example was a dog that just couldn't be trained properly for its work. And everybody's like, there are programs for this. And all of a sudden her name's not on this list.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
she
Now,
she
if it's
basically shot her career in the head
we
like she did a dog.
we had to
So
do that in Hawaii, and it was very upsetting to me
I've
as a
had to put
kid who
animals
was
down,
fixing
but
it.
they were always miserably diseased or
It
something.
was it was because um he was a very energetic dog, and he liked to run around with us, but the bratty kids in the neighborhood would antagonize him, and he bit a kid,
Hmm.
and dad had to put him down. I don't know that he had a choice in the matter,
Well, you get 2 strikes
but
nowadays. I
yeah.
don't know about I don't know about Hawaii. In Texas, you get 2 strikes. Freddie spent
Well,
the week in jail once
he
already.
he didn't say it, but as I got older and was able to look back in hindsight, there's the distinct possibility that the kid who got bit, his dad was a higher rank than my dad.
Uh,
So there may have been some political BS involved. But anyway, I've gotten us sidetracked.
yeah, yeah.
And
So those are the two things that they have to be ready for, and what they actually bring to the table. Now, with in the past, I would say Tim Scott would be probably the better pick because he
mm-hmm,
needs to pull in some more established Republicans.
mm-hmm,
But we're in the future where
mm-hmm.
43% of the US is independent. And you brought him up, RFK exists.
Yes.
And Tulsi would basically destroy RFK's campaign
I don't know that
because
she would destroy it, but she would make
she
it
would pull
harder
enough
for him to pull votes from Trump rather than Biden.
yeah, exactly. So if he's protecting himself
Mm-hmm.
uh from RFK, then Tulsi's the pick.
Yeah.
I think if he picks Tim Scott, it actually increases RFK's chances of winning this damn thing because increasingly
Yeah.
more Biden supporters are going to him, and he would have alienated the independents that are kind of leaning to.
The the only thing Tim Scott does for you, possibly, is that he is so vanilla.
That's why I said
um
he's the black he's black Mike Pence.
is will he help you pull suburban women because he's so milk toast, he's so likable. I don't think he'll pull enough. I think the problem with Tim Scott, and I have thought this for years, just when it comes to the nuts and bolts of politics, it's made no sense to me that the Republican Party has been so obsessed with getting more black vote because, oh, the Democrats get 90% of the black vote every election. And if we could just get 5 or 10% of that, okay, but hold on. You're talking about 5 or 10% of a very small number because
Yeah, yeah, and that was going to be the point I brought up because okay, say Tulsi gives you 10% women and Scott gives you 10% black. Well, 10% of 50% of the population versus 10% of
exactly,
14% of the population.
exactly.
Now the other thing is, and I can't remember if it was Phil Labonte or if it was Tim Pool on IRL that said this. It was on IRL between the conversation between the two of them, but one of them brought up, and I kind of had this thought, but they put it into words better than I could have. It's the ultimate out for independence. So you say you want to be in your circles, you want to get invited to the parties, you want to do all of these things, and they say, "Oh, I can't believe you voted for Trump." And you go, "No, I voted for Tulsi."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And everybody goes,
Well,
"Oh, well, I didn't think of it that way." Trump's old, maximum one more term. I voted
mm-hmm,
for Tulsi. I didn't vote for Trump.
mm-hmm.
And that gives you your out where you can vote that way without having voted that way intellectually. And
Exactly.
and
And
that can get through some mental barriers people have, which
it
actually it would swing my vote if he picks Tulsi.
yes.
I would swing that way. If he picks Tim Scott, I would probably go. I'm speaking of this pulling independence from, I would probably vote RFK if he picks Tim Scott.
That's exactly where I was headed. Was if he picked, she's not on the list, and I think she should be, but if Trump picked Tulsi or the Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, I would seriously consider voting for him. As of right now, I'm voting for RFK, even though I didn't like his VP pick. But here's the point. Here's the real reason that I'm voting RFK is because let's settle this like adults. All right. This is settle this like adults. One, two. Eh. This is my shirt for today because
So that's a dangerous one because AI can beat you every time.
I know. But no,
Yeah.
the point is it dawned on me ultimately the presidential election doesn't matter. Because and now I've said this before and but it's been a while and it deserves reiterating because I've been hearing more and more people on the right say this is the most important election of our time. Now, the Republicans and the conservative media establishment has been saying that for since 1996, which is as long as I've been paying attention to it. We've got to get Bill Clinton out of office. It's the most important election of our time. But even people who recognize that and have lambasted that in the past, even those people are now saying the country can't go on like this. You look at inflation rates, you look at the growing unrest around the world, et cetera, laundry list of everything that's terrible. Here's the problem, though. I have long said if the country's future hinges on the election of one president, the country's already lost because
Well,
our system is designed to prevent exactly that. That means the system is broken.
therein lies the problem. And I think what people are feeling is the greater and greater and greater control of the federal government and the executive branch. The deep state, as we talked about, being the
Mm-hmm.
number one example
Mm-hmm.
of that, because they determine the heads of those departments. They determine the
Exactly.
direction those departments go. And if something like the Department of Education could come out and create a document that we all have to live
Mm-hmm.
under by law, that negates Congress's role. So yes, it is actually getting that way because we keep increasing the role of the executive department. We need to, the three biggest changes we could make to get rid of that mentality is no more lobbies. We would regain trust in the Congress. No more lobbies. Second, limit the deep state, whether it's term limits, whether it's some sort of transparent accountability system, something where the states get to monitor what's going on in the deep state, something along those lines. And number three, no more executive orders except in a time of war. War being Congress declared an official war, which hasn't happened since World War II for those that
Mm-hmm.
think Vietnam and Korea and all of these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Even Korea, people don't realize.
Desert
No,
Storm.
they're
Even after post 9/11, when everybody was on board with the same thing, that was not a
mm-hmm.
congressional action.
Mm-hmm. There was a congressional authorization of force and a congressional authorization of funds because we were actually still passing budgets back then, but
But
there
there
was
was no
never a
declaration of
declaration
war.
of war.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the president only has those powers under a declaration of war. Period. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they only enforce what Congress does, and that
Now,
is checked
an
by the judiciary.
an exception to that would be something like the Article 5 of NATO because that is a ratified by the Senate treaty. So that does have the
Yeah,
force of
but
law because it was properly ratified.
I think that would be a reason to have a congregation of
Yes.
Congress.
Presumably there would be a declaration as well. But the
Look,
reason I bring
we
that
live
up,
in, this is the thing. Maybe back in the day, you could say it takes time for these things to happen. Southwest Airlines exists.
mhm,
And in the off chance, which is less and less off as time goes on, a foreign country invades a NATO country, every single congressperson or senator can get off of work from their regular job, fly to DC, and have a vote that same day.
Yeah.
And realistically,
Hell, most of them have private airlines anyway.
exactly. But I'm saying if you want to take any logistical issues out of that, just make something where all of these airlines have to make space for a.
That already exists.
Okay, so there you go. It's already done. Yeah.
You brought up Desert Storm, Desert Shield, the buildup that was something like 6 months preceding that. There's already a law to requisition civilian aircraft for military purposes. So they used FedEx planes to help ship supplies to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. So okay. So Russia does what the warmongers keep telling us they're going to do, and they invade Poland. That would be what, 10 hours difference in time.
Mm-hmm.
So at 2 a.m, you get the message because you're on call for something like that, because that's major.
Mm-hmm.
You can be in DC by 10 o'clock, no matter where you are in the United States, and you could be making a vote on this no matter how tired you are. And if it's a NATO ally, that vote is probably yes, right? Because that's the treaty. So
Mm-hmm.
you create the declaration of war, and then you give the president powers. I'm just saying it goes through the same channel, and we need to reestablish the channels is
Mm-hmm.
the problem. No, the Department of Education can't revise Title IX because Title IX was ratified by the Congress and then signed off by the president. You
This
cannot
is
make changes to it. Now, maybe Department of Education can write a paper of recommendations to send
yeah.
to the Congress, but to change it, you would need the congressional approval.
All right. So pull up that clip of RFK Jr. and let me set this up because he so I want to do this in two parts. So Dave Landau, I've mentioned before, comedian I like. He uh RFK Jr. called into the show and they were talking and RFK went back even further than I would have because most people talk about like the Pentagon Papers and oh my gosh, they're lying to us. He made the point that I had forgotten, which was um uh when Gary Powers was shot down in his U-2 plane over the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union claimed they had done this, and the guy who was in charge of the CIA at that point, Dulles, goes to Eisenhower and says, "No, this isn't true." Eisenhower goes out, assuming he can trust his CIA director, and tells the American people the Russians are lying. And then the Soviets pull Gary Powers out and put him in front of a camera and say, "No, we're not." And that was the first point. And I was like, holy crap, I'd forgotten about that. That was the first point where the American people went, holy cow, our government is lying right to our faces. And then he goes through a long list of abuses of times that has happened. And it has just been getting worse and worse and worse. And we, the people, we are the government and we haven't done anything about it. And then Dave gives his own personal story of that. He personalizes it. And so I wanna watch Dave's response to that and how he personalizes the personal traumatic impact of this lying, and then we'll listen to RFK's response. Sound, you goofball.
We'll try that again.
Okay, boomer.
Dude, I was doing my freaking presentation and we had to do it, record it on Zoom and upload it to YouTube. And I did what I thought was the perfect one, and I turned it on and I didn't share with sound. And I was like, oh, God. I had to redo it. And it took me 4 hours to get that done. Okay, here we go again.
Anymore. Yeah. So there's so many different versions of truth out there, and people gravitate to their own versions. And there's nothing bringing us back to the center.
I agree, and I think there's so many different versions of government we see because there's so many different officials, and I think, like you said, there's no integrity in the press for us to believe any of that. And I think the real problem is, let's say there were, I mean, I know that there's only a few companies that do own all of the press, but the right people that write it, there's so many articles, there's so much information. You're not even making the money that you once did for writing out these lies. People are exposing, or not exposing, but putting out all this information for very little money, for clicks, for slight amounts of fame. It's almost meaningless what people are putting out as misinformation to make a profit off of now. So just as somebody, I myself, and I've talked about it on the show, my dad went to Vietnam. He died of Agent Orange when I was.
Tell me how far you want me to go.
Uh, uh, through his, it's like 30 more seconds of Dave giving his personal backstory here, and then I want to pause it and talk about it, and then we'll listen to RFK's response.
Okay.
Was a teenager and of brain cancer. The government took no responsibility for it. They gave him nothing, and I watched him go bankrupt. So I've seen what they do to their own soldiers. That led to my mom's own mental illness and eventually her suicide. And I've seen them not care about that either. So my distrust of the government happened when I was a young man, seeing the government absolutely not care about my father and my family after forcing him into a war that he didn't want to be a part of, even though he was a medic, he was a hero. And you see that happen. Like, what, for somebody like me, how could I ever learn to trust the government again? Because I haven't had trust for them since I was, I don't know, 5.
All right, pause it here. All right, so the reason
That's
ahead.
where every independent stands, because most of the independent journalists out there are like 9/11, WMDs, and then they go from there.
Mhm, mhm. And that's why I wanted to set it up with RFK's what he said before that, which was, dude, we're going way back. I mean, do I have to bring up the article? Because I could go back farther than Dulles and the U2 incident is. I could bring up the article again about how the government knowingly poisoned people during Prohibition because you're not supposed to be drinking alcohol anyway.
Yeah, and this is actually a place where I understand he's going for the middle class female vote, but this is a place where one of the top 3 contenders, being Jesse Ventura, I'm surprised he didn't go further down that route. I would like to see what happened there. If there was a discussion where it was like, I really want you, but this is a demographic I have to have. But I wouldn't be surprised if he looks at someone like Ventura for a secretary position in something like Secretary of War, that kind of thing, because it is an independent voice on all the atrocities of the past.
Yeah. Well, this is I can't remember if I said this while we were recording or not, but initially with RFK Jr.'s choice of VP, I thought he had irrevocably damaged his brand because now I've only listened to a little bit of her acceptance speech when he made the announcement. I've really only heard what other people have been saying about her. She sounds like a Looney Tune, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is it looked like a political decision because she's his biggest donor.
Yeah, well, political decision could take multiple things. She's his biggest donor, but she's also a demographic. Now, she might be confident. We don't know. Competent. We don't know. That I did want to reserve judgment on that till I had more time to really go over it. The
Yeah.
thing is, we've had a luxury of time because we're not going to get any other VPs until August, probably, on that subject. So I've been focusing on other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really did. That was my knee-jerk reaction. And my style, I have a knee-jerk reaction just like any other human, but then I want to take a step back and breathe and then come back in and say, okay, so what does she actually have to say? My biggest problem with her is where she got her resources from, not just that she's a distributor of resources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It would be one thing if she was a female Elon Musk who came in and built something to create that. But basically, she's the ex of the CEO, one of the CEOs of or founders of Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what she's done with it since then, I don't know. that's where I can't pass 100% judgment. But my knee-jerk reaction actually came from where she got her money from.
Yeah, the fact that she's a practicing druid, okay, yeah, I understand why that makes the Christian conservative right lose their mind. But the bigger concern to me is her Silicon Valley ties, because like I said, that to me damages RFK's brand as the man of the people, the man of the middle,
not necessarily
anti-establishment.
Because this is an argument that I actually got some kudos for on Twitter with Dave Smith, who RFK was on his podcast, and he kind of pitched, "Hey, do you want to be my VP?" And Smith is like, "Hey, don't put me in that position," you know. And the big thing was because he's a libertarian, right? And RFK is a traditional, more liberal Democrat, right?
Yeah.
And those clash in some ways. But my argument, and part of me was playing devil's advocate, but also there's a big seriousness in this, was why does your VP have to be 100% on with you?
Yeah.
Sometimes that actually, remember back in the day, you know, John Adams and all of those, that your VP was the second best in the election. So you actually did disagree with each other.
Good times.
But that's a good thing. Why should your VP be a lackey? That's what everybody worries about with Trump, is he's going to have a lackey. That's what they worried about with Pence, that he was going to do his bidding on that counting day, right?
Yeah.
Why should your VP just be a lackey? Look what happened with Kamala. She's a empty suit that got a demographic. That's what she is. Why couldn't it have been who was running against Biden that would have been a good alternate voice? Oh, Tulsi Gabbard. Why couldn't it have been a Tulsi Gabbard, a woman of color, you know, that actually opposed you on some certain things like foreign policy? Why couldn't we have that balance? And so that there's two parts of me. It's like, okay, it does damage his brand because you're bringing in this and you wonder how serious he is about his points, but also there might be a balancing force there.
And this is why ultimately, to me, his VP pick doesn't matter, because what he represents is someone who will actually not just talk about and then pass some bills that end up making it worse, but actually roll back the federal Leviathan. All right, because that's why I wanted to play Dave's intro to RFK's response here, because for decades, the public polling has shown that nobody likes Congress. It's been under 50% for I don't know how long. And yet, in the past couple of election cycles, every incumbent in the House and Senate has won re-election.
That's our lead-in.
At some point, we need to break this, you know, false dichotomy. And even if it's just a protest vote, this is someone worth voting for.
Wow, what a story. And, you know, the Agent Orange story, the woman who CDC collaborated with the VA and the Pentagon because they didn't want to pay the tsunami of medical care
That's
costs.
right.
They didn't want to admit.
Was that?
Did
you said something, or was that on the video?
No, that was Landau agreeing with our.
Oh, okay. I thought you said something to stop it. So sorry, audience.
They were war related, and you know they were classifying them as PTSD or just, you know, a lot of people just get cancers. So, and the woman that they put in charge of that CDC was a woman named Colleen Boyle. And she was in charge of orchestrating the entire denial program at Agent Orange. And she got exposed. My uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy, had hearings in 1975 and exposed the whole fraud. And Colleen Boyle was embroiled in these scandals. And, you know, she lost her. She was transferred by CDC to get her out of the limelight. But guess where she ended up? She ended up as head of the Immunization Safety Office, which is the vaccine program.
Oh, perfect.
And she was put in charge of
there.
managing the,
Yeah.
you know, the.
That was for anyone who wants more, you can go watch the whole episode. RFK is not in the whole episode. He calls in about halfway through, and they talk for like 15 or 20 minutes. And for him to have that, first of all, the genuine human empathy for Dave's story, but then to have that off the top of his head of, hey, do you know who did that? So there was a face put on both sides of the story. That's why I wanted to play that clip, because you have here is the human impact of our government not being accountable. Is Dave's story, and Dave's story is legion, okay, of the number of veterans. In Vietnam it was Agent Orange. In Desert Shield it was Gulf War syndrome, and they couldn't quite figure out what it was. And there were a lot of people who said, well, this isn't anything, because the symptoms were so varied. But it kind of turned out that, well, that's because of what they were exposed to and how they were exposed. And then now the big thing are the burn pits, and the chemical exposure to that. Okay, so it keeps going round,
which a certain president of ours should have sympathy for, considering that's the most likely probable cause to his golden child
getting cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the one hand, you have the human face of a government that is at best ambivalent to the suffering of its people. And that's the best case scenario. The worst case is that they're evil assholes doing it on purpose. And then RFK puts the face on the other side of, there was an actual human being who was in charge of this cover-up. And when it was exposed, rather than facing any kind of punishment, the regulatory agency just moved her. And now she's in charge of something probably a lot more important. So she actually kind of went up. Is, hey, good job covering that up, but now that you've been exposed, go do something even more important, and let's just not give a damn of if you take the same mentality with you over there.
Yeah. I don't even know if I have anything to follow that up with. Now, on the subject of RFK, to combine with something I said earlier about eliminating executive orders, one thing that he said that I liked, and this was actually really early on, said, first day of office, I'm going to do this executive order. And it was one to disallow pharmaceutical companies from advertising on TV. That's day one. That is good in some ways, but alarming in others, because you know my opinion on executive orders. But he followed it up immediately with, and then I will start the process of that going through Congress. So I'm going to put a stopgap, and then I'm going to let Congress codify that into law, and I will encourage them to do so.
Yeah.
That's why I have hope for this man. Now, I do think a lot of libertarians out there that are I'll bring them up again. One of my favorite people to listen to in podcasts and his music is Phil Labonte of All That Remains. He is, I think, completely wrong on RFK, and I think he strawmans him a lot. Because RFK released an ad that says, I will not take your guns. That's all it was. It was a picture of him, and it says, I will not take your guns. And he responded to that with, he will certainly take your guns. But I think this is a position where he hasn't actually listened to what he says, because he is conflating him with a Barack Obama Democrat when he's actually a JFK Democrat. And he even talks about stories of, we used to bring guns to school and have hunting days. I am not going to take your guns. And he even goes further to say, well, we need to explore all the other reasons people are shooting up schools. SSRIs, mental health, social emotional learning, fatherless households, all of these other things are where we need to take that direction. And I'm like, did you actually listen to those things? Because that's the real argument he's making. He will not take your guns, I think, is a serious statement.
what matters, I also think it's also a distraction, because to me, what's most important about RFK is that a vote for RFK says we've had enough, and it's time that the people in government are held accountable for the things they do, for the harm that they cause, and they have caused harm. Verifiable harm has been caused to people by bureaucrats, by regulators, also by elected officials, but we're not allowed to do anything to them except vote them out. So that is what his primary focus of his campaign has been. And people get hung up on the vaccine issue. The vaccine, for him, the vaccine issue is a symptom, because remember, his primary focus in his law practice, is a man who has practiced law, was environmental. Here is the environmental damage, and it isn't just the, oh, the evil corporations. It's, oh, no. Hey, the EPA itself has caused harm. Hey, does anyone remember that river? That small little river that they completely poisoned?
Well,
And
in his big
our
actions,
bad.
the one he worked on, the Hudson River, which was being poisoned.
Yeah.
But no, but again, he's a man of the past. He's an old soul, right? What we call an old soul. When you talk about him as an environmentalist, go back to the if anybody's our age in the audience, go back to the days when you watched Wild America on PBS. That's the kind of environmentalist he is.
Yes.
He's not the world is going to end in 2 years if we don't cut off all cars. That's not the environmentalist has become different things.
It is, this place has been damaged by these people, and they should be held accountable.
Yeah. Well, and he's in a space that I'm in, because I like to call myself a classical liberal, but liberal means a different thing now.
Yeah.
And conservatives keep hounding it and pounding it. And it's like, I want conservatives to stop using that word improperly, but also I have to understand that times have changed and that term means something different. But then there's also the part of me that says, don't let them control the language. And then it's like, no, that's a progressive. That's not a liberal.
That's where the term
that's
came
the
from.
lemur jumping off the cliff.
Yeah.
Progress doesn't always mean success. That's
a good point. And for anyone who doesn't know, the reason the left in America are the liberals is because it started in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the progressive capital P movement. Okay. And it wasn't a left or what we think of now as left or right. It was a both sides issue. So for instance, prohibition was Christian conservative right-leaning progressives that we know better than you, so we are going to ban alcohol because it's bad. That was the progressive movement from the right. The progressive movement from the left came in with bigger and bigger government, and it started under Woodrow Wilson, and it ballooned. Well, even under what a lot of people don't know is a lot of what the New Deal was. The idea that FDR was elected because Hoover did nothing about the Great Depression. No, FDR's own people admitted all they were doing was taking what Hoover tried to do and turning it up to 11.
Yeah, and so when I think of the word liberal, I think of its original meaning. There's a root word to it, liberty, right? Liberty, liberal. It's liberty, individualism, and universal humanity. So those two things seem contradictory, but it's understanding that there's individuals, but also we should, as individuals, have some sort of purpose for a community aim. That's where true liberals are like, and I think RFK stands there. So yes, we say welfare bad, welfare good. Well, a true liberal would say, well, welfare good in this situation, but welfare bad when it imposes entrenches my liberty, right? So this is one of those things that you don't have to pick. Binary arguments throw everything off. So I can have compassion for my neighbors while still protecting myself. And that's what true liberalism is.
If you want a good course on that, you can find it either on YouTube, or I believe the website is freetochoose.org, which is Milton Friedman way back in 79 and 80. He did a series on PBS called Free to Choose, which was based on his book of the same name. And he is basically the father of libertarianism in America. And a point that he makes repeatedly in that show is that self-interest is not a bad thing. And there is a difference between self-interest and selfishness. Just because you are pursuing your own self-interest does not mean you are being selfish. Self-interest is not a dirty
Funny,
word.
that's half of the selfish gene as well.
So,
your favorite author.
Yes, my favorite.
Yes. No. Another book that everybody should read. If you're getting a reading list, this is top 5 books anybody should read, is On Liberty, John Stuart Mill. I mean, what better book on liberalism can you get than that?
And a lot of these classics are available for free as downloads. A lot of the old classics.
Yeah, and even if you buy them on Amazon, they're like $5. Soft cover.
Yeah, if you want a hard copy, which more and more is becoming important because it might get edited while you're not looking. But anyway, I want to get to my main point here, which is why I wore my silly shirt of "Let's sell this like adults" of rock, paper, scissors, because that's what the federal election is to me. Is that, to me, it is not a waste of a vote if I vote for RFK as a protest vote. As a, I want him to surpass Ross Perot in total general vote, even if he doesn't give a single electoral college vote, because we need a large voice to say we are fed up and we are going to start holding you accountable. But the way we actually hold people accountable is on the local and state level. Now, I like Ken Paxton, and I like that he keeps taking the federal government to court, but at some point, that's not going to be enough, because at some point, a local or state government is going to have to say, well, good, I don't care. We're still doing our thing because you have no authority to do this.
Well, this is where I'll defend Paxton there, is because most of his lawsuits are, we're going to do our thing and you can't sue us. And that's, he's basically getting ahead of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need more of that. We need, as much as you may not like DeSantis, he did a lot of that in Florida. Was no, we're going to do it our way because we are a sovereign state, and this is what I think our people want to do. And if they don't like it, they can vote me out. And they voted for him by plus 20%.
I'm not going to use the word like or dislike with DeSantis, because I do like a lot of the things he did. My issue with DeSantis, this is my hesitation with him as a leader of the country, is he's like that Netflix suggestions thing. That, oh, you liked my COVID policy and you like my against wokeism policy? Well, you're going to love this abortion policy, and he passes it through when that's not what his people wanted. So he takes the things that got him there to mandate other things. Trudeau did the same thing in Canada. That's my dislike, is that he used his success based on 2 things to basically push through other things that had nothing to do with them. It's the same thing of, okay, so it makes me think of you differently if I know your abortion stance. So now I can say your economics stance, your welfare stance, your immigration stance, your
well, hold on.
Your climate stance.
We're gonna fight now, because I think that is a gross misrepresentation to compare him to Trudeau, because what Trudeau did, yes, Trudeau ran on a certain set of things, and then when he got into office, he started doing all sorts of crazy things. All of those crazy things were, back to your root word of liberalism, anti-liberty. They were grotesquely anti-liberty. You cannot like DeSantis's abortion stance, but it is a stance based on individual liberty. And he makes that clear that the unborn child is an individual with their own individual rights. So he is not doing any of the policies that he made. You may disagree with the policy, but the justification was always individual liberty and state liberty.
No, the justification
reinforce
was you
that.
liked me for this and this, so I'm going to do this other thing. It's
No, that wasn't. He has always made his personal stance on abortion clear and where it comes from. Where it comes from is I would agree with you if he was one of these weaselly Republican politicians that like to talk about being pro-life but aren't actually pro-life. Hey, dirty little secret, conservative Christians out there, the Republican Party isn't actually pro-life and never has been. It has a lot of pro-life members, but the party itself is not pro-life.
No, I'm keeping this on topic because you're trying to bring this back to a pro or anti-abortion route, which is the right of the zygote versus the right of the mother. That's not what I'm talking about. Is his constituents, for the majority, supported what they already had, which was a 15-week. Florida was a 15-weeker state. That's what they supported. But he used the leverage he got from his COVID policy, which was awesome, and his anti craziness in schools policies, which were awesome, to push the other thing that was against what his constituents agreed with. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the individual discussions within that argument. His constituents didn't want it, but he pushed it through because now he had the power to do so because of his other policies, which not just him, but all the people who got seats in the state legislature, which would have been necessary for this, who got it on his coattails of his COVID policy and his craziness in school policies. It's when you extend beyond what your people want just because you got there for another reason. So that's why I hate the two-party system, because there may be things that the Democrats say this cycle that are very important, but then they're going, okay, so Biden's a great example. So let's take someone like Bill Maher or name Sam Harris. Name another liberal Democrat that voted for Biden because he's a Democrat. Sam Harris does not believe in any of the wokey, stupid shit, and he doesn't back it. But he voted for Biden because he is not conservative policy on things like abortion, welfare, give me some other issues that he might support. Now he's in a place where he's being forced to accept all the woke, stupid shit when his basis for voting that way was something else. And all of us that are in the middle or on the right are saying, well, you voted for it. And he's like, no, I voted for these other things. Whereas someone on the right, say abortion was your thing, and you vote for, I don't know, who was the most anti-abortion in the primaries? Probably Tim Scott or
the most anti-abortion.
Yeah.
In the primaries, it was probably DeSantis.
Yeah, probably DeSantis. So you say you voted that way on that, but there was other issues that you would disagree with him on, economic issues or whatever. So now you're being forced to vote for you have to pick your policy. Whereas,
that's why this isn't an abortion debate, because my point is it's not about the policy, it's about the philosophy.
Well, no. I'm thinking here's what I'm saying is, if these people wouldn't go with it and run with it on other issues, we would not be as voters stuck in that rock between a hard place of saying, well, this is an important thing for me and I need this and the country needs it right now. But now you're going to do all this other stupid shit. Same with Biden. Okay, so this is important to me. Say I really hated Trump's tax policy. I really hated Trump's tax policy, so I voted for Biden because of that. But I really hate the woke policies too. well, I didn't vote for you for that. And if you polled all of your constituents, I guarantee you there would be a small minority that said the woke policies were what pushed you in that direction. But yet you went and ran with it because that's your party's side.
All right, but here's the fallacy in those people who you referenced who are going, oh, I didn't vote for this. You were apolitical until very recently. And this was one of the ding ding ring the bell moments we had way back at the beginning. You pointed out, even as apolitical as you are, Biden's an empty suit. Voting for him is dangerous because for his entire career, he has been a which way is the wind blowing, because all I care about is power and getting elected. Okay. Biden doesn't have a core philosophy except power and money. All right. So for someone like DeSantis, he espouses a political philosophy. So you can expect what you're going to get with him, even if you disagree with the particular policy of, well, this isn't the best way to do that thing, whatever that thing is, you at least understand it's going to be coming from this particular direction. RFK Jr., I'm sure if he somehow got elected president, he would enact policies that I would disagree with, but it would all be coming from the place of roll back the federal Leviathan, hold people accountable, take away the power that these unelected bureaucrats and regulators have. So even if he introduces a policy, passes a bill that I don't like, I at least understand where it's coming from, and I approve of that philosophy on the whole.
Well, and then you're kind of, I think we're talking in a little bit of different directions, but you're kind of supporting me here. This is one of the reasons I like RFK in the process here, is because if DeSantis was the Republican nominee right now, I think RFK is our next president. Because you do know what he's going to do, and you do know the extremes he's going to go to, because people don't like Biden. People don't like inflation.
I think it would be a slam dunk if DeSantis was the nominee for DeSantis.
No, he has established himself as, I'm going to do these conservative things.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you would have is a president we have right now with all the stupid shit going on with Israel, Ukraine, domestic issues, inflation, all of these things. And then you have two candidates outside of that. You have one that says, I did this in the face of COVID, I did this in the face of wokeism in our school, and I did this in the name of conservatism. And you have an independent that says, I have these views and I have all of this legal work in the face of COVID. I have this international policy, which is very anti-interventionalist. So you're the same in these areas. Oh, and I am a liberal and I want to compromise on all these other issues. And I think that would be more evident against DeSantis than it would be against Trump, because Trump is a really good fence rider.
Don't tell his rabid supporters that.
Well, there's something good to that, though. The one thing, so a Trump Tulsi card, this is why I like it, is actually two former Democrats running in the Republican Party. That's what it is.
Well, here's why I like it, and why I say Gabbard or Reynolds would make me seriously consider voting for him, is that the reason I get so ticked off when his rabid supporters attack people who are criticizing Trump, the reason we got the Trump we got in his first presidency is because he was attacked from the right. Because he is malleable, because when he recognized that his base was not happy, he would shift.
Well, I think it's a great example of what can actually go. Republicans wanted more to happen and the populists wanted more to happen. That's on my side. I would say I'm a populist, not necessarily a Republican or Democrat. So Bernie intrigued me before he folded, because he actually legitimately was a populist. I think his method is wrong because I think socialism requires force. So that's why I can't go down that route. But then we got a populist from the other side, and we could have ended up having a two populists fight each other if it wasn't for the DNC. But the where was I going to go? I distracted myself with Bernie.
Yeah.
What did you say right before I did that?
Oh, that he's malleable and he will shift if he recognizes that his base is not happy.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing in the sense that you want to make your base happy because you're actually listening to the people of America
rather than the establishment swamp.
Yeah, rather than the establishment swamp. So he needs to find the balance of I know I have this position where I have some knowledge you don't have, and I'm willing to be transparent about this, but at the same time I'm fighting for you, and I think I don't know if he's capable of doing that, but we'll find out.
Well, which is why I think his VP pick is so important, because it's going to signal who's going to have my ear. Who am I going to be listening to when it comes to policy advice? Is it going to be an establishment guy like Tim Scott, who's a very nice guy, but I can't tell you a single fight he's been in, a single argument he's led? He's
which is why I think he's leading the thing, because that's what Trump would pick. But no. Okay, so what I was getting at is I talked about earlier the further and further federalist or not federalist federal government power. Trump is actually an amazing example of how the balance of powers can check things. Everything everybody was afraid about didn't happen. Why? Partly because he wasn't as evil as they thought. That's part of it. And the second part was there was a balance that said no. Anytime he had a crazy idea, they were just like, no, you can't do that. You have to go through us first. But then when Biden gets in, they just say, what is the freaking guy Johnson now? Oh, you want this? Oh, CIA takes him to the back room and says, oh, well,
FBI. Yeah. It was
FBI
about revising or repealing the FISA court.
Yeah.
And the FBI takes him into the back room, and translation, the best case scenario is we scared the crap out of you with very one-sided intelligence reports, or possibly more likely, here's all the dirt we have on you and your friends.
Or here's a picture of JFK. That's the conspiracy theory amongst independents is every time a president gets in office, the CIA director just pushes a picture of JFK in front of him. but we know who picks the head of that, and that's the administration, right? So the administration is controlling everything, where we saw the opposite of that. And yeah, to our detriment, but also that tells you, oh, there's actually a check and balance here. The president isn't, as you were concerned about, the president isn't as destroy the world as he's got his hands on the nukes. Well, there's actually a check and balance system where the person who gets the order says, no, I'm not going to fire that missile.
That has actually happened in the past, where there were massive boo-boos in the system, and the person who was actually supposed to push the button said, technically I'm supposed to just push the button, but I'm going to call for confirmation because this doesn't feel right.
Yeah. So we have systems for that, and gameable systems or the least gameable systems are what's important. So if we identify holes in that, let's do it, which we're doing, which we're seeing when we see what happens when a president is willing to lever those systems to his advantage. This is the worry with Trump, is he's going to get in and not drain the swamp, but he's going to create a new swamp. That's my worry. That's why I liked Vivek, because Vivek is like fire, all these positions. Is Trump going to go in and fire people, or is he going to go in and replace them with his people?
That is the biggest criticism of Trump that his most rabid supporters refuse to recognize, which is the guy who he was already famous, but he became super famous with The Apprentice and You Fired, and he never fired anyone.
except his own people, really.
A couple of people he fired finally, eventually. Comey should have been gone the second he came into office.
He never fired anybody of import, but he fired the people who talked to him in private and said, maybe you should do something different.
Yeah, if they could even get in. Scott Atlas's book, Scott Atlas, epidemiologist, public health policy guy from Stanford, who was on the COVID task force, and he couldn't ever get in. He couldn't get past Pence and the son-in-law Kushner. He couldn't ever get past them. And they made it clear that there were political considerations to worry about. And he was trying to show them actual data.
And you look at some of these people. Kushner is a great example. Yeah, he probably got the job because of his relations, but also he was so crooked in those ways. But you have to give him credit for the Abraham Accords. It's like, gosh, dang it! Why do you make me hold you in this? Which one was worse? Which was worse, that you insulated the president against criticism, or that you did this good thing? I don't know. This is where, again, transparency comes through. We should have more access to what goes on inside. Like so back to Johnson going back in the back room, and the CIA talks to him, or FBI talks to him, and he comes back out and changes.
Where's the body cam footage?
Based on what he saw, why can't we see it? If it involves Hamas or it involves Russia and nuclear bombs, why can't we see it? This is important to the public. In fact, it's very important to the public, because if it involved Hamas, how many protests would we be having if we knew the real story? If there is a different story, it probably involves him in his personal life, like you said. We have this camera footage. That's not your wife.
Yeah. Like I said, the best case scenario there is that they showed him a very one-sided, designed to scare the crap out of you story about the impending evils about to befall America if we actually do repeal FISA, or actually, remember, way back I brought up the law, and the law makes it clear, and so far as I can tell, it has not been amended. We just ignore it, that you cannot use this information against American citizens. Period. It's in the damn law already. That is one of my
but an
huge
agency
gripes,
changed the law, just like we talked about with the education.
And why I appreciate RFK and people like him is pointing out, hey, we already have laws on the books. We don't need to pass new laws. We just need an executive who will tell the executive branch to enforce the damn laws, and if you don't, you're fired. Or we need people at the local level that will say, you're not enforcing the law, so we're going to ignore you.
Yeah, and this is where I think the debate stage comes into play.
There won't be one. I don't anticipate a single debate.
Biden and Trump have both challenged each other. So if you challenge each other, then that means, isn't there a de facto acceptance on both sides? But
it's all posturing, and they'll come up with reasons why. Well, they wouldn't agree to this. Well, they said we had to do that. No, they'll come up with reasons why we can't do it.
Why is this not required? Because, so they say it's not required for the RNC to have primary debates. It's not required for the DNC to have primary debates because they're private companies. This ceases to be a private company. This is the office of the presidency debate. I saw an interesting thing on Bet David. They were talking about the gag order with the current trial he's in. And they were saying, one of the questions was, can the judge extend this gag order all the way past the election? And they're like, yeah, he actually can, if he extends the trial past the election. So what happens if the gag order is still on and there's a presidential debate and he talks out of gag order turn on there, And so it was a interesting thing. So it's welcome to the Banana Republic, my friends.
A banana republic, if you can keep it, madam. Pretty sure that's what Franklin said.
No, I think the cog in the wheel is what we've been talking about. RFK changes things because
That's why there won't be. That's why I'm 99% certain there won't be a debate, is because they do not want him on that stage.
But I think he could capitalize on that concept. The sad truth is, if he didn't have a speech issue, his poll numbers would be 10 points higher. If he could talk like he did 10 years ago, which was more like his father. Yeah.
Even with the media blackout. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
we beat dead horses at this point.
Yep. Vote local. Pay attention to what's going on with your local elections. We've got one right now that's like bond issue crap. And every time there's a bond issue, I'm like, no, unless you live in rural West Virginia, governments at every levels have more than enough money. Just spend it smarter. Stop trying to take more of my money, you a-holes. I vote against I don't care what it's for. I vote against every tax increase.
Drainage council or something, and apparently it's a huge deal. And I've got big giant things on both sides to read through before Monday when the voting opens. So my neighbor's real big into one group. A couple of my clients are real big into the same one, but then established Friendswood is really into the other. So see, the problem with local, I will say, is my same problem with I talked about with DeSantis, but on steroids, is you have the people who have been around forever and they're established, and their opposition is something extreme. So we had this problem with we'll talk about schools, with what are you going to let in your schools? Well, there's been a person doing the job horribly for 40 years that was up for re-election. But the opposition was your wokey. And so your choice was, you're doing the job horribly, but you're not woke, or the person who's going to ruin everything that was already semi-ruined. And that's the problem with local elections, is because that's the norm. You very rarely have a nuanced person to get behind.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we only got a couple of listeners, but if the three of you out there listening have a resume and public speaking ability, I will more than happily volunteer my ability to, I can rant on camera, but public speaking, hell no. But I will more than happily volunteer my ability to research and write and advise and help with talking points and speeches, because I can't do that. So I don't care if it's for your school board. I will research the local issues in your local area, and I will come up with talking points, bullet points, and speeches to help you run. If you want, just slide into my DMs, baby. Giggity.
Right. Well, if you're doing it off the YouTube video, it's going to be our DMs, but I will forward them to you. Yeah. Because I usually check those things.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see y'all Friday for, oh, it's not going to be fun time, is it? I think it's Perrin and Matt chapters. So
it is Perrin and Matt chapters.
We'll try and make it as fun as we can.
Yeah. And if you wanted to do the fishing, I don't know if I'm going to have time to read, because I've got 30-page essay to write.
No, you got essays to write, and we got rain coming in, and the next week you got butt surgery, so we'll just have to play that by ear.
Yeah, and I will still be bedridden by that Saturday. So yeah. Well, I did make a setup. It's going to be great. I took one of the old chairs from downstairs and an ottoman, and kind of made like a recliner thing out of it right in front of the TV in the room, and I set up like a mini bookshelf, and I got my PlayStation 5, and I got a place where I can set up food, and so I've got a little mini setup where I can just not move, but I can have multiple things of entertainment.
All right, it's gonna be great. The next time we come back, Sam's gonna look like when Bender became human on Futurama.
And I'll probably have gone through a couple playthroughs of Baldur's Gate, because I basically can't get out of bed. So we'll just keep going.
All right, we'll see y'all next time.
We'll see y'all later.